on. Fantastic. So, we are future leaders. Do we have any future leaders in the room? Can we make a bit of noise if you're a future leader? Yeah. It's an incredible honor to be speaking with you all today. And when people say, here's Sarah, she's a public speaking coach, two things happen. First of all, the bar goes rather high. And everyone sort of leans back and goes, public speaking coach, really? Well, let's see what you've got. And the second thing that happens is internally. And it's something like, oh, shit! I'm supposed to be doing this. And I'm supposed to be doing it with some degree of confidence, right? Now, something you need to know about me is that me and public speaking confidence do not go together hugely well. I'm going to tell you a story in a moment. Today is going to be a series of stories, but the first story that I'm going to tell you is about my first experience ever with public speaking. And I have been historically terrified of it and still continue to be. Just now, palms sweaty, other things sweaty, feeling like, crikey, do I really want to do this again? Coming in on the train this morning, I come from Hertfordshire, and that part of me that wants to be invisible, was secretly hoping that there was some kind of major disaster in London and this whole event would be cancelled. And then when Vanessa got back in touch to reschedule it, I would unfortunately be unavailable to attend. So there are these parts of us that want to be invisible. And I know, I've been working for more than 10 years, my team and I have been working for more than 10 years now with senior female leaders, from CEOs to top entrepreneurs and even to royalty. I know that the feelings that I have are exactly the same as the feelings that my clients have, and probably exactly the same as the feelings that you have towards that horrific act of being visible. Resonate? Yeah, okay. So what I'm going to do today is lift up the bonnet on some of the things that we all experience, but we don't think anyone else experiences because we think they look confident from the outside. Okay, before I get there, let's look at some of our numbers, ladies, because we can see that in terms of visibility in all aspects of life, there are some problems. Who can tell me the percentage of MPs, our elected representatives, the percentage of MPs that are female? Who knows? Give us a guess. 10%, 5%, 25%. Okay, we're doing better than you think on that level. 32%. But yeah, you might think, oh, that's pretty good. That's almost a third. But reframe it. Almost a third, or only a third, of our elected representatives. Why not half? And that 32% is about as good as our numbers get. 25% of senior execs are women. Only 20% of owners of SMEs. And only 11% of after-dinner speakers. Isn't that crazy? So my question is, come on, ladies, where are we? And why can't we make it to after dinner? Okay, so I'd like to share with you today 3 really important lessons that I've learned from senior women, working with them and helping them through that process of becoming more visible. But I'll start with my little personal story around standing up and speaking for the first time. So who here actually currently right now has a fear of public speaking, that if I told you to get up on stage right now, you'd be terrified? Show of hands, please. Oh, many of you, thank you. So this makes me feel a whole lot better. Being someone terrified of public speaking, what do? Do you go for the public speaking or do you avoid it? The part of me that was terrified many, many years ago now absolutely avoided it. And avoided it, and avoided it, and avoided it, until it was so urgent that I couldn't say no. So instead of working my way through the little opportunities, I found myself on stage to 200 people trying to justify why it was that I was the right person for what at that moment was my dream job. That was my first ever piece of public speaking because I procrastinated and avoided it for so long. So the stakes are up here and my nerve levels are up here too. And you can imagine how I felt waiting outside of the door to this conference room, not dissimilar to this room, knowing that any minute now I was going to have to go into that room and inspire those 200 odd people that I was the right person for that job. How do you reckon I felt? Cacking my little knickers, absolutely terrified. So what I did was I got myself into my Zen mindset. And all that happened was I replayed something that had happened at the very same event a year previously. That year, I was sitting in the audience watching a friend of mine, let's call him Dave, a friend of mine going through the same process. And Dave strode to the front of the room, looking really confident, snappy suit, stood up at the front and said, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, my name's Dave." And you could see the color drain from his face, and he slumped into himself. He forgot every single word that he was trying to say. Oh my God. So there I was standing outside the room thinking, don't do a Dave, don't do a Dave, whatever you do, don't do a Dave. And you know those moments where your name's called and you kind of go into that outer body experience, and my body sort of walked me up on stage, put me in front of the audience. Have you had that experience? You don't really know that you're there, but you're kind of doing it on autopilot. And my body got me to the front of the stage, and my mouth opened. And I said, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, my name's Sarah, and I managed to do my speech. Yes, I managed it, and I got the job even. How incredible is that? But the best thing that happened that day was not that I managed to get the job, it was that I did the thing that I was most terrified of and got through the fear. So my lesson from that is that we have to feel the fear and do it anyway. And in fact, that has put me on the pathway to think not just if I feel the fear, can I do it? But if I feel the fear, I must do it. Because when we're afraid, ladies, we are learning. Isn't that right? Okay. So the 3 lessons that I have from these women that I've been working with all of these years and from watching them, there's a big difference between the type of leader who is inspiring and who drives change and who creates movement in their world versus the kind of leader who's not really a leader at all, who is in fact a manager or a follower. So the first thing that I've spotted working for those ladies who really managed to make a change is that they are willing to set the agenda. So often we, as women, put ourselves in the position of serving others as opposed to setting the agenda. Let me illustrate. There is a female leader I know, wonderful lady. Give her a pen and a piece of paper and a business problem, and she will solve it like no one's business. Hand it back to the client, finished, sorted. But, now these habits may resonate with you, she organizes her day in an incredibly intense way. Back-to-back meetings with very little time to reflect. Email inbox, completely crazy. Any time that she has to think or to strategize, she automatically goes into her inbox or onto her phone, the curse of our times, the smartphone. She has booked herself into a yoga class, bit of work-life balance. How many of those yoga classes has she been to in the past year? None? Oh, better than you think. She's been to 1. Well, congratulations. And she's the kind of person who is always happy to solve your problems. So it's wonderful to know her because you just jump on the phone to her and say, "Oh, look, I've got a problem. Could you help me?" And before you know it, half an hour, 45 minutes, your problem solved. Thank you very much. You put down the phone. But what's happened to her? What's happened to her agenda? So she is one of those kinds of people who has all the balls up in the air. She's juggling. She's a fantastic juggler. But the question you can ask yourselves is, whose balls are she juggling? Is it hers? Or is it somebody else's? So who recognizes at least some of those characteristics in that example? Yeah, many of you. And it is our utmost responsibility, if we're going to be leaders, to set the agenda rather than to be swayed by someone else's agenda. Because if we don't set the agenda, someone else is going to do it for you. So 2 of the most important questions that I've ever come across that I want you to all write down, that we must be asking ourselves. The first question is, what do I want? If you're able to answer that particular question, what do I want, then you're starting to take charge of your own career and the world around you. So first question is, what do I want? And the second question is, what do I not want? Now, you could say that they're the same question, but actually they are so important, because if we don't delineate what we want to get rid of, if we don't prioritize, then we're just following somebody else's agenda. Okay, so this is how we start to get influence, by being someone who is setting the agenda, by being someone who's willing to have a voice. Now, the next step, so this is tip number 2, is that without then voicing that, it's just a nice idea. So we need, ladies, if we're going to do something about those numbers, if we're going to be future leaders and actually have positions that we put ourselves into, the second thing I want us to be aware of is the willingness to put our hands up. Now, as a child, I used to be so enthusiastic about any opportunity. I was one of those really gobby little girls who would happily fling myself towards the school play, towards any opportunity. But I remember, age 13 in my French class of my all-girls school, suddenly realizing one day that I was the last person to have her hands up, because for the past 6 months behind me, subtly, every single girl in my class had chosen to devoice herself. One by one, they all put their hands down and decided to stop participating. And whether we do it in such an extreme way, or whether it's just subtle ways of not being quite willing to put our ideas forward in meetings, or not being quite willing to put ourselves forward for public speaking opportunities, we can reflect on the way in which we do that for ourselves. I see many moments in my life where I'm just subtly not quite putting my hand up as much as I should. So we've got to get our hands up, ladies. We've got to make sure that the voices that we represent, which is not just our own, it's the voices of all women. If we're able to put our hands up, then other women will feel emboldened by that too. Yeah, actually, I have a really interesting recent example of this for myself. A couple of days ago, I got an email dropping into my inbox. Who watches Dragon's Den? Thank you. You're going to have to help me, because I've never seen it. But I got an email from a dragon. Jenny Davies? Is she a person? Yeah, more or less. OK, so she dropped me an email, and there was an attachment. So it was a sort of letter via email, very formal. Saying, oh, I'm Jenny Davies, I'm now head of the Women of the Year Awards. And the first couple of sentences I thought, oh, gosh, is she nominating me for an award? How flattering. How wonderful. How, OK, bit nerve-wracking, but how wonderful. As I read on, she said, yeah, I'm running the Women of the Year Award. Your profile has come to my attention. We'd like you to consider nominating yourself for that award. Nominating yourself for that award. How many triggers does that bring up for you? If you got an email like that, all the defense mechanisms that swung into place immediately for me. Well, what does she mean, Woman of the Year? Isn't that a bit stupid? What about all of us together? Why should there only be one of us? That was a very sort of legitimate sounding excuse. Then there was, well, hold on a minute. I haven't been doing this long enough. I'm not ready enough. I think someone mentioned the statistics in the last session that women tend to wait until they're 100% ready for jobs before applying, versus men who have the tendency to be able to apply for jobs when they match the criteria 70%. So there was me going, oh God, you know, I'm not Woman of the Year. I can't see myself in that way. And I realized that I was doing precisely the same thing that every one of us does. That instead of jumping forward and going, right, I might be ready for this, or I can get myself ready for it, I was waiting to be ready. So all these excuses came up, and it feels really confronting even to mention this to you, because I kind of know what comes when I mention it to you. You are all going to hold for me what? That I should apply, right? Yeah, because we do that for each other. It's an incredible sisterhood that we have in this room and beyond, that we can say, go on, love, give it a go. But why can't we do this for ourselves? So if I'm going to put myself forward for this ridiculous, crazy-sounding award, then I want you to be able to do the same for Women of the Year, or for the We Are the City Awards, or for whatever it is, whether it's an award or an opportunity, just to get your hands up a little bit more, okay? Do you agree with me? Yes. Yes, because otherwise we know what happens. Somebody else who has a bigger voice, who's probably doing less than you, actually ends up getting that recognition, ends up getting that opportunity. So we have step 1, figured out what it is we want. Step 2, we've put our hands up. That is the important tool that we need to be able to vocalize what it is that we want. But now what happens when you have your hand up, like some of you did in the Q&A session, but you don't get noticed? And it kind of feels a bit embarrassing because you kind of wanted to talk, but nobody's given you the platform. Or worse, what happens if you put your hand up, somebody gives you a platform to speak, and then you get criticism back? What happens then? A client of mine had just completed writing a book very recently, and it's gone up on Amazon. Fantastic looking book, fantastic content. And so she had her hand up, and she was kind of waving it around, saying, hey, look, here I am, read my book, hear my thought leadership. And then she got a 1-star review. A 1-star review from someone who hadn't even read her book. How horrible does that feel? Oh. So even in those moments where we've taken that leap to stand up and to say something, or to speak out in a context that we wouldn't normally do, what happens when someone criticizes us? We can get that feeling of being incredibly vulnerable, like a crab exposed from our shell. It's taken all that effort to get out there, and now someone's criticizing me. So if you're anything like me in that situation, I would run right back into my shell and not want to ever get out of bed ever again. But of course, we have to learn that if the criticisms come, then that's a sign that we're doing something right, not something wrong. We have to learn to be comfortable in that feeling of criticism. And critically as well for us, I think that one of the biggest pieces of service we can do when we do get the moments of spotlight is to take up space. Now, this is something I see constantly in my public speaking work, that when we have the spotlight as women, we're brilliant good girls. You know, we're very good at kind of getting things done and sticking to time and, you know, making sure that everyone around us feels comfortable. But very practically, that can lead us to squashing ourselves, almost physically. The drive to be thin is almost like, ladies, you need to take up a little bit less space in the world. But on a practical level, it means women, when we speak, we often speak really fast. And that's a way of hurrying along our impact rather than letting people hear very clearly our perspective. Or we put so much content in because we're trying desperately to offer value to someone else. Anyone done this? So much content into our presentations, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 30 things, because we're like, well, maybe they'll like one of those things. Or we physically shrink our impact because it feels weird to stand open and big and powerful. So I want you all to think about taking up more space when you are handed the mic, when you are given the spotlight, to take up more time and space, and to run over time if that's what you need to do in service of your message. Let's not be such good girls. As a closing little story, I'd like to just share with you an experience I had recently. I took a bunch of senior women to Speaker's Corner because it's through going through the fear that we get to a place of being able to do more, right? We make more territory for ourselves. And I've done this more than a dozen times with speakers, but this time I was taking some of my top clients. And, you know, we literally spoke at Speaker's Corner. So I got myself my stepladder, the new fashion statement loaders, and walked towards Speaker's Corner, the home of freedom of speech at the corner of Marble Arch. And as I got closer and closer to it, I could feel the nerves rising from my belly into my throat, because all around us were packs of men videoing other men talking to men. There was one female speaker. Now, nobody gives anyone permission to speak here. You go there or you don't go there on your own basis. Eventually, we thought, well, OK, we're just going to get up and speak. And what was most incredible about this very male-dominated environment was the impact of these women. The men and the women in the audience said to us after we'd spoken, wow, you are incredible. This was really different. You listen to us. You have interesting things to say. You care about the world. They said to us, we need your voices, ladies. Where are you? Why don't you come here? And they said to us, ladies, please come back every weekend. We want you. So for me, this is not about Speaker's Corner, although it might be. You are welcome to go there. This is about any time when we approach a male-dominated environment and we feel the nerves in our stomach rise to our throats and we wonder whether we have permission. We do have permission, but we have to start by giving that permission to ourselves. So ladies, if we can do one thing from today, I would like us to be more visible and to dare to put ourselves forward, even when we feel nervous, and in fact, especially when we feel nervous. So in the spirit of hands up, I would like you all now, if you agree with me, to put your hands up to being more visible and to having more impact. So hands up, who's going to do that? Incredible. That's pretty much every single person in the room. If you can do that, that is what's going to get you to being the future leader that you crave to be. Thank you very much.